Last week I promised you guys Valentine's Day themed frogs, and I just wanted to start the video with a sneak peek on how my learning to draw frogs crisis is going. It is a crisis indeed, but I think I'm finally getting somewhere. So that's what the first chunk of this video is. We're going to devolve to funguary uh, obsession, like pure obsession, like insane amount of funguary. So a lot of hot fungus babes in today's video. So with that in the future, frogs right now. Hi, hey, hello. If you're new here, my name is Rain. If you're not new here, welcome back. I really appreciate you stopping on by to my little corner of the internet. And I hope that if you feel like getting creative alongside me, because creative is love, being creative is a form of self-love, you can tell me about it in the comments down below, share it with me, tag me, anything you're up for. I feel it. I love it. Love to support you guys the way that you support me. If you have any comments or questions throughout the video, just drop them down there. I'll get to them as soon as possible. I love chatting with you all. And with all of that being said, let's get into the crisis that is frogs and everything that comes after. In my great pursuit of knowledge and understanding of the concept of a frog and the drawing of a frog and the body of a frog, I have concluded that the only frogs I am capable of drawing without making them look demonic, questionable, horrifying, and maybe uncanny are circles, lumpy circles, to be very clear. They have to be lumpy circles. I have concluded that frogs are not a good oval, but they are a funky oval, a slightly flattened oval. You know, a good kind of wonk to it. A bougie wonk. A good little bit of unevenness to a good frog. I have concluded that it is more of a tapered oval, like an egg, rather than a perfect oval for the most part. Think an egg with oddly placed googly eyes. That's a good way to articulate it. And the craft of concluding how to achieve a well googly-eyed egg has taken some time. It has been a bit of an experience, but I think, finally kind of beginning to understand how I would draw frogs in my style. As you can see on the spread of understanding, I have done some studies of real frogs. The creature entity on the right page, raising his hands to the sticker, is purely from imagination. There is no reference I have found for that thing. That is an entity of my own uncanny brain juice, and I don't have words for it. It was a mistake, but he's there. He's praising the sticker, and that's fine. You need to put a pencil to paper and create wrong sometimes, and that was what came of it. And I stepped away from drawing frogs for a while this week, to think, how would I want to draw frogs? And I've concluded that I don't need everything in my style, my art style, to be purely consistent in actual kind of translation, which sounds wrong, but I think the right way to articulate it is that my art is sharp enough. There are enough edges to it. It isn't perfectly soft in a way where a purely oval frog almost seems a little bit off. Like a nice round, soft, more kawaii is not the word I'm looking for, but a very cutesy kind of playful interpretation of a frog is a little weird in my art style. I think that you can kind of acknowledge that if I were to put this frog drawing next to my Victor fan art, you would think, what are you doing? These are two different art styles. And I think to an extent that is true. And that there is a distinct difference between how you would interpret them as coming from the same artist and if they would suit each other within the same world. And the answer is probably not. However, I think equally so that is something that I need to just kind of figure out in rendering. Like, I need to find a way to render these frogs so that the oddly cute, rotund nature of them isn't so distinctly off from my normal style that it creates a disjointing and kind of jarring experience for a viewer or somebody looking at them. Because I have found that while I can kind of draw a semi-realistic shaped frog, we're not talking about the frog on the right spread. We're talking about the frogs on the left spread for the um semi-realism. I don't know what that thing is. He just happened. Um, I don't enjoy it, and it's one of those things where I understand it enough that I could do it if someone asked me to. However, I prefer the oval frogs. The oval frogs make me happy. They bring me joy. I like doing them. I like giving them big, cute pupils. And considering I'm learning to draw frogs and teaching myself to draw frogs so that I can do cute little Valentine's Day themed fruit frogs, I don't really feel particularly compelled to push myself to think about this beyond what makes me purely happy. And tiny little oval loaf frogs is what makes me happy. And they're the perfect shape. I want to make fruit frogs, okay? And ovals and egg shapes are like perfect for fruit frogs. Strawberries are kind of egg shaped, oranges, grapefruits, peaches, all of them are, circular-ish. Nothing's a perfect circle. And it's just right, okay? And then I can make bread frogs, like circular loaf frogs, And I have found that this has brought me extreme joy. However, I also find that I am somebody who benefits from trying to draw something accurately, then doing a style exploration, and then returning once I've done a style exploration to the referenced proper image. I did have reference of more oval-y frogs for the circular frog drawings, but I'm hoping in my kind of fun, cutesy frog video that I want to do that I can also do some proper like studies of frogs, put them up on screen and all of that, and actually approach it now that I've kind of worked out how I think I want frogs to look in my style, and then see how that has changed my way of interpreting a normal drawing and like reference drawing of a frog. I don't know how much that makes sense without the visual example. However, I am somebody who very much needs to approach things from multiple different mindsets and multiple different like times and experiences to actually be good at the thing and to solidify the actual kind of decision that I make. So I'm hoping the frogs work out in the future, but I am planning some fruit frogs for Valentine's Day and I'm very excited. With my fruit frog disclaimer well settled and my frogs displayed to prove that I am in fact trying my best to learn how to draw frogs, I would like to explain that the next 10 to 15 minutes of this video or so will be me talking about my thumbnailing process, why I think thumbnailing is important, and you will be seeing on screen 3 times speed me thumbnailing. Like a lot. Because I said, oh, I'm only going to do like a couple of drawings for funguary. I don't need to draw 3,000 things for funguary. I don't need to draw every fungus this month. I don't. I really don't. But when I went through the when I went through the list, I only ended up finding like 3 funguses where I was really like, yeah, no, I definitely don't want to draw that one. And I have references for the other like 25 of them. Am I going to do all 25? I don't know. But I was only planning on doing 1 or 2 more. And long story short, by the end of this video, there's going to be a lot more than 1 or 2 more that I've created. So that's wonderful. I have a lot of rendering to do. I have a lot of drawings here. I have a lot of thumbnails I haven't even brought to proper life yet. But as you watch me draw Trumpet of Death and the sketch for that, I just want to say that there is an extreme value to the thumbnailing process, and I think it's something that gets underlooked. And maybe it's because it's something that I would love to make a part of my profession. Maybe it's because if I were to get to ever work in an art studio, which is a dream of mine, um, I would love to be specifically in character design and thumbnail art. Those are the two things that I think I shine the best in. I think that I do pretty good thumbnails, and I think they capture a life that most other aspects of my art just don't capture the same way. I very much do enjoy the thumbnailing process, but secondarily to that, I really like looking at other artists' thumbnail processes. I like looking at the initial birth of an idea before it actually comes into the world as a proper illustration, and the moment when a small box is put on paper and the idea goes from brain to physical visible concept that people are capable of looking at, that is a moment that I don't know, it has kind of an innate beauty to it, you know. There's something so pure and magical about like that moment when an idea is brought into the world in a visual way that other people can begin to understand. And I love it so much. And so not only do I think the thumbnail process is incredibly fun, and I think it produces some of my best work unironically, which is it really work if it's simply the birth of an idea? Who knows? You can make a debate for that if you want, and I will try and provide counter arguments for a fun little conversation. But I think that there is something so just inherently lovely about it, but also I love watching artists thumbnail. There's something very enchanting to me about watching other artists put down their initial ideas and then start to talk about why they made the initial tiny decisions they did or why they redid a thumbnail. And so that's what we'll be talking about. Trumpet of Death, I actually didn't have to do a second thumbnail for. I liked the idea. Usually, I recommend doing 3 thumbnails, even if you like the initial idea. However, I wasn't actually sure if I was going to commit to any of these illustrations, and I simply wanted to birth them into the reality, right? So, while I'm working on Veiled Lady, I immediately decided that I didn't like the pose. I didn't like the feeling of the kind of veiled umbrella hat vibe from a full body perspective. You know, Veiled Lady, the veil does go all the way to the bottom of the mushroom, like 99 billion% of the time. Who knows? I'd have to actually like Google. I didn't study veiled ladies in any of my mycology, but it goes very low, and I feel like it doesn't make sense to take up the entire illustration with the veil, despite the fact that the veil is the center focus. So I wanted to create something more prominent and visually distinctive, but easily recognizable under that veil so that you didn't feel like you were missing out on something or confused when trying to identify it. You know, the body, if I fill up the whole page with it, you're missing a lot of information where that veil is actually like covering the entire illustration. So I cropped the full body idea just because I wanted a dense veil. That's the reference I had. I really liked my reference and I wanted to emulate that in particular. So cropped that and I brought it up close so it's more of a kind of like peeking out from beyond the veil, peeking through. And so you only are really trying to identify from the eyebrow region to the under chunk of the breast, like maybe the bottom of the rib cage at most. And I thought that that was a great kind of chunk of the body, a nice torso. And it was going to eliminate the concerns of hands having to kind of account for like where are the legs, all of that. And if I'm covering up too much of the important information that's being conveyed. So I felt like it was a good kind of compromise. I do want to do an umbrella drawing with a veiled lady one day, but I'm not entirely sure how I want to approach the umbrella concept and if I want to have like a part in it or something, or like it peels back. But I want to do an umbrella theme one day with a veiled lady. I think it would be very fun. I just am working pretty small. I don't work very big very often. And I would need to think of a technique and an approach to actually rendering the veiled lady in a way where I didn't feel like it was kind of impeding the actual information conveyed, And I just wasn't, that's not where I am when I'm thinking about funguary, right? So moving on to the wrinkled peach mushroom that is mostly done. Wrinkled peach mushrooms have a very interesting kind of like fluid that comes out of them, I guess would be the way to articulate it. And I specifically was looking at references where it kind of resembles that of an amber color, which I really, really love. I'm not entirely sure what specifically comes out of wrinkled peach mushrooms when it comes to it's called like gutation or guttation. I actually never learned how to pronounce it correctly because I had so many science teachers who were like, if you pronounce it close enough, we'll know what you're talking about. I had a really chill college when it came to botany. But basically the gutation, which is what I prefer to call it, is just kind of a fluid that comes out of the mushroom. It's pretty well, it's not super common in fungi. It's more common in like vascular plants or, like angiosperms, like when like moisture is kind of beating up on a plant. It's possible, not necessarily guaranteed, that those gutations are basically just kind of like coming out of the plant from its transpiration system because basically it's shut down overnight, right? And so, or it'll be shut down during the day, depending on the temperature when the transpiration system needs to be like opened up to let water in properly or to keep water from leaving the system, right? So if the transpiration system is like open and it's a super hot day, all of the water is going to basically leave the plant because it's super dry out there. And then the plant is going to be like, I'm dying. I need water. Help me, please. So depends on where you are, depends on the plant. Transpiration is, kind of It's just basically excess moisture coming out of a plant or building up. It's kind of like when sap leaves the edges of something like a tree or even like a plant that produces sap. Like when the sap is out and about, it's just an extra moisture and it just kind of comes out. That's kind of what gutation, to my understanding, in fungi also is basically that this moisture has nowhere to go or it's being created in an excess and it comes out. Uh, Wrinkled peach mushrooms have a very like really pretty gutation and it looks like massive amber tears in the reference I have. Sometimes it's a little bit more pinky. Sometimes the gutation will be completely clear, not necessarily for wrinkled peach mushrooms, but like in mushrooms, it might be completely clear. And so obviously I needed to do some sort of illustration that was a person sobbing. And because wrinkled peach mushrooms are just so like feminine and soft, like I know their cap is like a rubbery texture. It's very much not soft, but it looks like velvet, right? It's like really, really, really soft looking, right? Just because I know it's not true doesn't mean it doesn't look that way. It has a very feminine feel to it. And so I wanted to do like a sobbing, dainty woman who was like desperately panicked or like sobbing, but like with bougie. I don't know. I'm trying to articulate it, but like definitely not an ugly crier type energy, right? And that's what I wanted to go for. So my first thumbnail once again did not go how I planned. So let's chat. You have now watched me basically like hatch to the high heavens out my wrinkled peach mushroom sketch and then like draw almost perfectly a dainty Victorian woman surrounded by tears before completely moving on with my life. Now, actively in real time, I'm working on a mushroom that I have decided I hate. Do I think it's pretty? Sure. Does it look nice in the wild? Absolutely. Would I like to see it in my yard one day? I assume it's not poisonous, so maybe if pink wax caps are in fact poisonous, no, I would not like to ever see them anywhere near me ever. They're a wild mushroom that grow with reckless abandon. They are quite the specimen to look at, like really wild. And I failed this sketch 4 times and I still hate it. So this is just not working. But my original idea, I wanted a bit of a chubbier face for the wrinkled peach mushroom. And I just did not get my head shape down correct from the get go. And it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. Now, there's kind of like a joke that like artists can't draw circles. They either like draw circles like really scratchy, or like they like can't draw them at all whatsoever. And I'm in the camp of I can't draw ovals and I can't draw semicircles, especially a semicircle in perspective. So, as soon as I brought the kind of like mushroom cap into the illustration, it was all so downhill. I did not fix it the first time it went wrong because it's a thumbnail. I thought, okay, hey, it's not a big deal that it's a little wonky. And it continued to throw me off to the point that I just started hating the drawing more and more and more. So I completely scratched that idea and I went for a front facing approach. Firstly, that allows me to focus more on rendering the amber tears and not having to care about actually having interest to the face in the background. By making the face the predominant thing present, the hair then filling up almost the entire rest of the canvas, the piece of paper in the thumbnail sketch, I am now able to focus on rendering the amber tears and getting the reflection down in a final illustration, not having to care about what's behind it, and rendering the mushroom cap and the gills and creating that interest in all of those details, because the focus for me actually wasn't the mushroom, right? The reason I really wanted to do the wrinkled peach mushroom in the first place was because I really liked the gutation that it had, and I thought it would be a really fun drawing to do, inspired by the dainty femininity. And it's got a bouge to it, but like a cutesy bouge. And so I'm really using the word bougie this week. Okay. I need to calm down. But it's got a cutesy but elegant feel to it, Like the princess of a kingdom, definitely not queen. Definitely got some sort of like authority though, and a youth to it that is just kind of adorable. So I'm going to be adding like earrings and some cute decorations to the collar that I kind of implied eventually, but that's something I want to do as I'm actually rendering the illustration. I don't really feel the need to plan it because I'm thinking kind of like a charm bracelet type effect, but for a lacy choker type feeling, something that's very fun and interesting, but doesn't require a whole lot of like care to it that can be kind of just whipped out, Cute little charms, not something that's super like innate or intricate like a gold jewelry or a silver jewelry, right? And that way I don't have to worry about distracting from the tears too much, but I create a little bit more personality to the character that will kind of help still create intrigue and allow for it to be a little bit more representative of how I personally like interpret the mushroom. You know what I mean? Yes, we are going to continue to ignore the pink wax cap because also on the list was scarlet wax cap, and I actually did have a good time with it. So, well, no, I had 3 thumbnails, but this one I believe is like specifically hygrosabi cocnea. I think I chose specifically hygrosabi cocina, or coconea. I'm not great with mushroom names. My Latin is awful. However, long story short, um, I don't really know that all scarlet wax caps are actually scarlet wax caps. You know what I mean? With mushrooms being so weird and kind of unwilling to not be mean and terrible entities, it's hard to know. But anyway, this scarlet wax cap specifically looks so much like the pet safe candle I have in my bathroom. When I use a candle warmer, I don't, it's pet safe in my bathroom. I don't want fire when I have as many cats as I do, right? So I use a like mug warmer for my candles so they like melt but they don't burn. Um this mushroom looks exactly like what my candle looks like when it's cooling. Like it gets a nice dark red in the center and like the edges and stuff like that. Or it'll do and vice versa depending on like the temperature in the bathroom, but whatever. It looks so much like it. And to anybody else interpreting this mushroom, hello, Hyde. Speaking of cats who would definitely light themselves on fire, it probably doesn't like look like a candle to like other people, but it looks so much like a candle to me, and I just had to go with a hot wax mommy, okay? I needed a wax girly, and my first sketch was pure wax. Like think goo, think world of goo, slime chick, and I wasn't loving it. So I went for a more like Art Nouveau kind of like Vogue portrait idea, like really close up wax dripping down the face. Also hated that. So completely went back to the mushroom head idea, which is like my go to. Like mushroom, put the mushroom I'm trying to interpret on top of someone like a hat is like my panic. I don't know what to do. And so I put that up there and I made it the candle, right? So it's like the head is kind of the candle basin or like holding the candle basin, which is smoking. There's an implied fire. I don't want to render the fire because I don't want to add too many elements that are going to be distracted. And I want the head tilted back up. Like it's watching and looking for the wax that is dripping down. And so it's smoke, and then the wax is pouring over the edge of the mushroom, dripping down onto the shoulders and the breast. You know, it's kind of hot, it's kind of fun, but there's not too many visual elements happening where it's like super overwhelming. And this is honestly one of my favorite sketches of the entire thing, and probably actually the full sketch, which I don't show in the video because I literally spent like 8 hours this week sketching mushrooms, like unironically, like 8 hours this week sketching mushrooms. Um, that one I really did spend forever struggling with, and I don't even have words to articulate just how awful of a time I had trying to get the sketch to look as satisfying as the thumbnail. And I think I need to make an entire YouTube short just like complaining about the experience and trying to go through that process because it was not a great time for me. And I honestly was just like not having the time of my life. And so, because I didn't want to force you guys to watch me render for like 8 hours a bunch of different sketches in blue and red pen, what I am instead going to do to talk about all of these processes is have my Trumpet of Death drawing playing and then put up the images of the other sketches as I'm talking about the problem areas I had with them, but mostly just talking about the Trumpet of Death because this actually is a sketch that I tried to redo and then figured out why I didn't like the sketch and fixed it despite having done a redo sketch that I hated even more. And I just want to talk about the kind of thumbnail to sketch process and why I think thumbnails are so important to capturing the initial idea, but also why I think it's important to assess that every different stage of your work is something that needs to be cherished in a different capacity. And you need to not apply certain pressures upon yourself because I think that there is very easily a mindset people get into. I hear about it a lot in terms of like the line art is so much worse than the sketch. And I want to talk about that experience and why it happens, how I think it happens sometimes, but also like how to assess what's going wrong so you can fix the problem later and how I approach those ideas. Also, I did an entire like YouTube short asking if I should redo my Trumpet of Death sketch. And I did get some opinions of like the things that I want to talk about, like the things I already subconsciously knew, but wanted the external validation of people saying that I was correct in this like feeling or like taking the course of action, which I think is really funny. But I definitely was seeking for external validation for an issue I didn't actually have. And I want to talk about it. And I think it's really important to kind of like assessing your own work. So, that, and if you guys saw how much I like wanted to cry over the Scarlet Wax Cap, you would literally like yell at me. I think of the thumbnail stage of a drawing as kind of the plan before the plan. It is as I mentioned earlier, I think the birth of an idea onto paper. It is that beautiful moment where something leaves your mind and actually goes down onto a paper. But it's also kind of like the plan before the plan, right? And so the concept around thumbnail sketches is to get out the idea and then to workshop the idea multiple times, usually, to see how you feel about it, test compositions, test ideas, test plans, and to then kind of think through and troubleshoot issues to make sure that you are making the best version of the illustration you want to make possible, rather than going through the process of doing a bunch of big sketches and workshopping it at a larger scale, workshopping it in a colored pencil versus a graphite pencil for me personally. You're workshopping it small, quick, efficiently to see, do I like how this sits on the page? Do I like how it fills up the space? Do I want it to fill up the space more, less? Do I even really like the concept enough? Do I like the facial expression or the initial idea for a facial expression, right? Because there's a lot of different faces you can make with one illustration and one pose of a character when you're doing a bust. It's like, which one do I want to go with to have the best possible illustration? Which is actually where this the larger sketch went wrong earlier. I mentioned that I restarted it and then came back to it. But that is kind of like what the point of a thumbnail is, to think about all the different ways one idea can come to life or one initial idea can be born, right? And to save you time and energy and to allow you to think through multiple ideas in a quick way, to save them for later. That's why I really don't have any issues or shame around the amount of thumbnail sketches that will appear in my sketchbook over time, or the sticky notes that I do thumbnail sketches on, because it allows me to document an idea as I have it when I don't have the time, the energy, or the resources, be it brain power, the materials I have on hand to actually execute a larger scale version of the idea. Or maybe I'm not actually interested in fully executing the idea, but I don't want to forget it later, right? Thumbnails are just such an invaluable resource, and I love them. And I just I love thumbnail drawings. I'm sorry. It's like a weird obsession. But then to transfer it to a sketch, especially for me who has an art style that's definitely a little bit more concise when rendered. How do I articulate this? I put a lot of weird guidelines down when I sketch to help document where colors are going to go that aren't necessarily going to be as presented or don't make as much sense without the color. Additionally, I have a lot of extra lines that I put just because my style is complemented by it. I really like the circles on the cheeks that I do, the random circles in other places, the weird swoopy lines I use to kind of indicate a curve to something, right? I like those extra lines, those little touches that are completely unnecessary but indicative of the way I like to draw. And so, because of that, my sketching can be kind of chaotic and sometimes a little bit harder to follow. Um, I don't know if that feels hard to follow for other people, but the way it exists in my mind, I have a plan of where the colors are going to go. I don't know what colors, but how I'm using my lines to kind of map out the ways that I will sculpt the nose to make it appear more 3D. And some of my lines I fully intend or expect not to survive when I sketch. Um, Especially if I'm not going in with line art. Line art I tend to be a little bit more accurate, but all of these, I plan to do my usual marker illustration and then kind of paint pen approach. So a lot of these lines are going to be lost eventually and reformed in a different material, be it paint or with a fine liner once the paint is all down, basically. So, um, sometimes the sketching process can be a little bit consuming. And I don't know if I've talked about this on my channel, but having a chronic illness that causes a lot of like hand and shoulder pain, and I also have a shoulder issue, like it's got a tear in it that I was supposed to heal naturally but never did. And so I really rely on my wrist more than you're supposed to as an artist. Artists are supposed to draw with like the full arm, but I can't really roll or move my right shoulder very much. It causes like extreme burning pain, right? So drawing big is actually really hard for me, and it takes a lot more kind of effort, I guess, to translate an idea to a bigger piece of paper because I'm like clumsy with it. Like I don't know how to articulate it, but it's like it doesn't flow as well when I like actually try and like execute it. And because of that, I generally have to do a sketch a couple of times before I actually get it right. It's basically the same concept as I was talking about another time in a different video. How I think it was my Jace fan art video or the video where I did Jace fan art. I have to kind of go through and like practice something in my art style before I actually can like draw the person pretty good from memory or by heart, right? And so I had to figure out how to draw Jace in my style and then subsequently Victor in my style before I could actually comfortably draw either of them. And it's like a trial and error process. And that tends to happen every time I kind of take an idea and I bring it to a bigger piece of paper. It's why all of my sketchbooks are really small. And it's usually why I don't actually finish or execute a larger piece in one video because I know subconsciously that I need to step away for a really long time from these types of like drawings, like moving a thumbnail to a bigger piece of paper, or especially if I'm working on bigger paper, I need to step away and like completely cleanse my brain of it if I actually want to see these types of illustrations actually achieve completion. Mostly because I have a hard time actually identifying if I did it correctly. That sounds weird. How do I articulate that better? I I always like my thumbnail sketches more because they're easier to execute um comfortably, I guess you could say. And because of that, my bigger sketches never actually look quite like I want them to thumbnail wise, like thumbnail to sketch. And I need to fully step away and remove myself from the drawing for at least a couple of days, usually, so that I don't find myself obsessing over the differences that didn't actually translate, or so I can identify where it went wrong and why it doesn't look like the thumbnail that I like really wanted it to look like, right? And so when you kind of like translate thumbnail to sketch, I have to have at least a 24 to 48 hour like step away period before I can actually like move that sketch forward in time because I'll have a lot of issues with it that I can't fix in that initial moment. And it's not entirely like a human error or an artist error issue where it's like I'm not seeing it correctly and translating it correctly. It's more so like I feel more stiff when moving to the bigger piece, and I push myself too far to get the thumbnail where I want it to be on bigger paper before I'm like physically ready to actually like commit to that much time. And I tend to get really frustrated and irritated. I'm like, it doesn't look like my thumbnail. It doesn't look like the plan, the idea. And I like the thumbnail more, which gets frustrating, of course. And then I usually devolve into hating my sketch. However, I know that I need to step away, give my body time to rest, and then go in and reassess like where the lines ended up clumsy, where things didn't translate very well. It's like that self-care I was talking about, I believe 2 videos ago, where it's like, as a chronically ill artist, you need to give yourself time to rest. You can't push yourself super far in one sitting. And if you do, you will create artificial resentment for your art because you're putting your body in a situation that it shouldn't be in. And then you're pushing yourself in ways that you shouldn't be, which is like creating either the illusion of failure because you just physically can't be at your best, or you're putting yourself in pain, which then creates a situation where art is associated with physical discomfort in a way that will push you towards a negative feeling around the process, right? And I'm not really good at actually like stepping away from the piece for that long and actually ensuring that I don't execute the I hate this piece sketch, right? Sketch idea process. So I really enter this mindset of it's ruined, I hate it, it's wrong, even though I know I really just need like 24 to 48 hours to not look at it and then look at it with fresh eyes and then re-workshop the issue, which would be easier if I didn't have such a heavy hand when sketching. Really, like this pencil that I'm working with is super hard to erase. And because of it, it really does make actually fixing issues incredibly irritating because you never get rid of the original line. Um, so I do actually shade a lot more with colored pencil or this colored pencil when sketching than I usually would because the like eraser lines are so frustrating. I have to create like artificial shadows and hatching to not get confused. Like the lines don't lift very well and it becomes incredibly hard to tell like what is the real line and what is just like the previous, like it really just looks like shadow or like shading and it's really confusing and frustrating sometimes. But I love this pencil. It really fits well in my hand. It's the PH 802 Pentel multicolor or whatever, and it's a really thick pencil because it's one of those like 8 color pencils, and it's incredibly comfortable to hold. It doesn't hurt because it like, well, I mean, it kind of hurts, but everything kind of hurts, but it really does fill out my hand better. And so it's a lot more comfortable than a lot of my other mechanical pencils. And the lead is super nice, like really nice. So this might become my like number one mechanical pencil that I use for like sketching because it's really comfortable. And it does make sketching feel a lot easier on the body. Like I'm able to like sketch for longer before like my hand really starts to like throb because I'm not like pinching it. It kind of sits, I can have it loose in my hand and it'll still mark as well. I don't really need to apply like physical pressure for like the initial like baseline like stuff, right? For the super light marks either, because it just really marks once you hit the paper. And so that's also really nice. I can let it just kind of rest gently in my fingers to get the kind of initial gesture out, like the basic circle for the head, the eye line, and all of that. Because I follow them, yes, but they don't need to be super accurate for me to figure it out. I always recreate the eye line when I actually get to the eyes anyway, and do a more kind of direct system to make sure the eyes aren't super lopsided. The lead is also obviously super thick, and so I don't break it as much when I do try to apply pressure, and I'm able to sketch more like, so not, but like with less intention is the right way to articulate that actually. Like I don't have to think about the act of sketching. I can just do it because I don't need to worry about holding my pencil at an angle that will snap the zero 0.5, 0.7, or zero 0.9 lead. It is super inconvenient to try and like get more. Why is my cat so angry? Hi, what's wrong? If you can hear her, she's just throwing a fit, and I'm not entirely sure why. She's just like yelling at the foot of my bed. Um, but William's kind of always been a weird girl. She's my Scottish fold, so she just like yells at my other cats when they like walk by her. Sometimes, especially my orange cat. I think she hates orange cats. I'm not sure. Um, but she has a superiority complex over them. But if you can hear her, she's fine. She's just giving them attitude. But I don't have to like worry about breaking my lead because it's super thick, which I didn't realize I was doing until actually starting funguary and using this pencil because I recently got it as an attempt to kind of like not cramp up my hands as much. I was like, oh, this pencil is not only really thick, but I think it can really help me to use more variety in color and use that to distinguish things better. And like the actual reason I got it, no questions asked. I just really wanted a like multicolored pencil because they make me happy and they fill me with that like childlike joy of when I had them when I was a kid. I had one when I was a kid that was like 16 colors and it was purple and the barrel was absolutely massive. I would say like two Sharpies or like those extra thick broad tip Sharpies like wide. It was gnarly. And it was a pen, not a pencil, but I don't know, I don't know. The multicolored pencil pen thing just fills me with so much childlike joy. Um I had those instead of like the multicolor like in the singular tip of a pencil. I have some of those, but they don't draw very dark, and the light sketches can be hard for me to see. But that's an irrelevant tangent, and completely not to do with my topic section about thumbnails and sketching. So I should get back on track before I talk about multicolored pens for 30 minutes. I actually love this pencil so much that I'm actually almost out of the blue lead, which has never happened to me with a like super thick leaded pencil before. Like I've never used one so much. Like I've like actually needed to buy the replacement lead. So that's great. But it's a quite a bit more of the actual sketching process before I get to explaining what exactly it is that went wrong or like showing visually like what went wrong because I really do spend a lot of time with this blue pencil going over lines and making it more defined. And another thing I like to do because and I like to do it because I just uncovered that I like to do it, but I've found that because it's really hard to erase this pencil, doing the entire like base sketch pretty well rendered in a red pencil or the red barrel, and then switching to the blue one to kind of like extra define the lines so that I can kind of tell what red lines were mistakes a bit better is helpful, like kind of necessary for me. Also, because if I just like keep filling in areas with the red, it'll get confusing. And the Trumpet of Death is like going all the way around her head, like it's a full wrapped collar. And I put her shoulder really low, and at an angle. I kind of, it's hard to tell, but the intention was the Trumpet of Death has a really like long barrel. Barrel is not the right word, but it's also not really exactly a mushroom stalk, right? But it's kind of like a tube shaped and then it furls out, right? Because of that, I wanted to give her an extra extended neck. Like I already draw pretty long, thin necks, but this is a bit closer to excessive and too much because that's kind of what the barrel looks like. And I wanted it to carry over a little bit more effectively. So basically, you could see her shoulder is like sloping up, it's at an angle, and it's like tucked between the petals. And that back blue triangle, basically, that is occurring is the petals from the I should not they're not petals, it's a mushroom. Um are the like ends, the lips, I guess, from the back peering over. And so I wanted to have that very distinguished, but I didn't want to shade it in red. I wanted it to really look like something that was in the background. And I don't know what it was that like compelled me and took me off the deep end with this drawing, but it was too late at this point. She went full court jester. I didn't know what to do. I don't know how it happened. I swear one second I was doing a good job of not bringing clowns into this, and then, she got the star on the eyelid and it went downhill from there. So she's a clown. But the Trumpet of Death kind of sounds comedic and clownish to me. I don't like clowns personally. They're not my thing. But if I do have a clown, I very much like a Victorian court gesture type like clowniness. I Not really a clown. I guess think Victorian court gesture, but like make it during the Black Plague, which I think is actually pretty befitting of the Trumpet of Death. It's definitely not like the most toxic mushroom on the planet where like if you breathe near it you're gonna die or anything like that. But its name kind of makes you think that it might be. I'm under the impression, like the pretty solid impression, that Trumpet of Death mushrooms aren't actually poisonous at all. I'm pretty sure they're edible. Don't eat them if you see them, because I said I don't think they're poisonous. I have zero confidence in my mushroom hunting skills. I would never eat a mushroom I personally found just because I have the worst luck when it comes to things like that. Um, and then thirdly, I'm actually allergic to mushrooms in a food allergy sense, so I don't eat them at all. So I've never even felt compelled to go mushroom hunting for consumption reasons. Do not, when I say I don't think something's poisonous, trust me. Also, if you Google it, don't trust the AI overview if it comes up. That thing will kill you. I swear. Please find a real, actual source made by a mycologist. Even if the AI overview ends up being correct, please don't trust it when it comes to consuming mushrooms, especially considering so many mushrooms aren't actually the mushroom you think they are. And for all we know, Trumpet of Death actually has 5 variations that look completely identical, and you can only tell on a genetic level that they're different. And 3 of the 5 are poison. You don't know. Mushrooms are so poorly studied, not just in America, but in general, they're horribly studied. It is very much a newly developing field. I will say it time and time again. I honestly wouldn't feel safe eating a mushroom or trusting myself to identify a mushroom without a professional mushroom hunter. And even then, I really don't feel like the mycology field has moved forward enough where I feel 100% safe eating mushrooms that people say are edible. Just because I really know how underdeveloped the field is compared to actual floral botany. Similarly, the lichen field is super underdeveloped, horribly underdeveloped. Please send help. Please go into lichenology. It needs it. But it gives death vibes is my point. You can't put death in the name and not expect me to take that and run with it. Definitely murder court gesture. That's the energy, that's the vibe. And that's also why I ended up not liking the sketch so much. So, hard to tell right now, but I want to point it out before I go and fix it so that you can identify the difference, because I think it's a huge difference, but I understand when you're not looking at the drawing for an hour in front of you and bringing it to life, it might be harder to identify just how substantial a difference is for some other people, but it feels monumental to me, right? in the original thumbnail sketch, she ended up having a lot more whites to her eye, right? There was a big sliver of white over the iris, and the iris didn't quite touch the upper like lid line, and that is what I end up realizing is the issue and why I'm not happy with the sketch. So you'll see in a second that I fully erase the pupils after a very long multi-day step away, and I bring them a lot lower, right? And the issue is I was trying to make her look kind of condescending, kind of better than you, and maybe a touch homicidal. And because I don't have that white sliver over the eyes, right? I realize that we're more on her level, like visually, we're a lot closer to eye contact than I want it to be. And so you really have to, not you, I really had to convey the feeling I wanted, bring the eyes down a lot and make them a lot more like a kind of like half circle in the lower lid. And so it looks like the eye is disappearing behind the lower lid a lot more, right? Like only maybe like a third of the eye is actually appearing over the kind of uh like lid, right? Like the lower lid is covering like a majority of the eye. And it's a very slight difference, and it's going to be a lot more obvious when I actually render it like in marker and paint. But it really brings us beneath her, right? She's looking down at us, and with how thick her collar is, she might not even be able to see us. And she still has that superiority complex, and she's above us. She's looking down upon us, and she's disappointed in our existence. So, with that being said, I saved the sketch, even though I kind of redid it, hoping to fix it. And I had a very productive week. I mean, I drew a lot of frogs, and I sketched out a lot of things for funguary, not just thumbnails, but also full sketches that I'm going to show you right now. But I really like the only thing I have to say is thank you so much through sitting through. Thank you so much for sitting through this absolute mess of a video that was me having an art crisis, like always, and also for showing interest in my funguary sketches and my thumbnailing at all, because it really is something I love a whole lot. So, like if you like, dislike if you dislike the video, subscribe if you would like to see like more of me, more of my content. Would like to see more funguary sketches. I will probably not render all of them this month because there's so many. But with all of this being said, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, night, wherever you are, and I suppose bye bye.